Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinsky's Tutorials. Today I'm going to do a walkthrough of Bleass Phase Mutant. So this is an FM effect plugin that runs on desktop, iPad and iPhone. I'll put links in the pinned comment. If you're buying the desktop version or other desktop plugins available on Plugin Boutique, you can support my work at no extra cost to you by using that. For example, currently this is $19, or I think that price is the same, $19, €19, £19. I might be wrong about that. Which is the same as the sale price on Bleass's site. And this is only $5, by the way, at the moment on the App Store. It's really fun. So I'm going to explain the controls and the general concept and give a few tips. And later in the video, I'll make some suggestions for improvements. But I do like this app, it's pretty fun. Here is just adding a little bit of a sort of plinky plonky thing. And initially I wasn't even using the amount there. That's pretty nice to go through a delay. And then play around with stuff like the waveform. Or the amount. Or the dry wet here. Or the ratio here. Right? And this ratio is being modulated by this sequencer. These LFOs are not actually doing anything, they're not assigned to anything. So we'll look at more examples later in the video, including on vocals and stuff. To start with, I'm going to focus on this. So here, I've got an instance set up where I'm using this Strips app that I did a walkthrough on. I'm just using two sliders from this to modulate it. Sometimes I prefer that to an LFO. I dialed this in myself to my taste in a very intentional way that just isn't possible with LFOs. So just modulating the waveform and the cutoff. But right now, I'm just going to switch to this, which is a default patch. And let's turn the dry wet up. So talk a bit more about the concept of this. So let's click on this algorithm section. We see first, by the way, we have three main sections. Here are the main controls for the effect. Here is the LFO and envelope that can be used for modulation. And here is the sequencer. So back on the effect page. One quirk, by the way, about this app, when you open up the plugin, for some reason it opens up on this one called Subtle Lower Voice. If you want to get the default patch, you've actually got to scroll back to default. So, a few really important controls here to look at. One is this algorithm control, another one is this intensity panel, and the other one is this amount section. So if you notice, first we're on light here, and let's just leave it at that for a minute. So now I've brought the amount up, but we're still on light, and I've just left the waveform as sine, so it's pretty subtle, and I haven't done anything to play with ratio. So it's a good time to just do a very like a 10-second refresher, what is FM synthesis? Basically, you have a carrier oscillator, that's what people hear. That oscillator is being modulated by another oscillator in the background called the modulating oscillator. So what you can do in this is, here, you're putting some sound into it. Like here, I'm putting in this output of this app, line hum. That's being sequenced by Snakebud over here. So that's going in there. So we have line hum and we have phase mutant. If we look at the algorithm, we have 3 different choices. This symbol means the oscillator, and this means the input, so that means line hum. Okay? So here, basically we have the oscillator inside phase mutant being the modulator, and then the line hum audio, that is the carrier. Here we've got the opposite. Here, line hum will be the modulator, and the oscillator inside phase mutant will be the carrier. In this one, we have self-modulation. Line hum, the audio of that will modulate line hum, right? Okay. So let's have a little listen to those. There's some quirks because things like the amount knob will behave a bit differently depending on which algorithm we've chosen. So waveform, we can go through from sine, morphing into triangle, and then into sawtooth. And I quite like this between the triangle and the sawtooth. That's often nice to play around with. And then into square. So FM uses ratios, right? The ratio between the frequency of the modulating oscillator and the carrier. One criticism I'd make is that in most FM synths, for example, you have the option for a totally free ratio. Here it's just quantized, and it's a very limited number of quantizations. There are just 16 options here. I don't know why that decision was made. So let's jump on to medium. And remember, we're still on the algorithm where phase mutant is the modulator. Okay, playing around with the waveform. Now play with the ratio, that's a lot more aggressive. Nice, huh? Quantized ratios are very useful in FM synthesis because they're more musical. My criticism is just that the number of options here is very small. Now extreme. Lovely. I'll bring the amount down. So now let's change the algorithm. So now line hum is the modulator, and the oscillator inside Bleass phase mutant is the carrier. So what's interesting here is, if you notice, even in the light mode and with the amount down, changing the ratio will still change the pitch. Why is this? Because remember, now we are hearing the oscillator inside this, and that oscillator is tracking the pitch of the input. And so here, even with the amount down, even without the FM modulation going on, changing the ratio will still change the pitch. So this ratio thing is a really nice thing to modulate with the with the LFO or the envelope or the sequencer. The sequencer is quite a good choice for that because the sequencer gives you, you've got a bit more control, which can be very useful for dialing in pitches. You want to find what exactly is right for what you're looking for, what's going to give you the right pitch. So 2 to 1, 4 to 1, and 8 to 1, those will all be octave jumps. Same with 1 to 2, 1 to 4, and 1 to 8, and the others will be sort of in between octaves. So this is medium in that mode, and this is extreme. Now, attack and release and smooth, these can make a lot of difference, as can this tracking feature. Let's jump over here for a second, and I'm going to just put the delay. I'm going to take its feedback level down. So the reason I'm doing this is because we've got a different left and right delay, we've got different stuff going on the left side and on the right in terms of pitch. I'm just going to open up a new instance of this. Okay, so you see what I was saying? This is not actually the default. So here's the default patch. So default. Let's bring this in. Let's look what algorithm we're on. Okay, we're on this one here where Moto Akame, the synth I'm sending into it, is the carrier. Now, let's put it on medium intensity, and I've put the ratio up a little bit. And so this smooth knob, this will slur the notes when there are pitch changes, sort of legato thing. Which can be really nice, actually. But if you want cleaner pitch jumps, then keep that down. So also super important then, and that's why I switched over to this patch, is what you set the tracking channel to. So we can follow the left, or the right, or both. So if we choose both, we're going to be getting a lot more jumping around here, since we've got delays on the left and right with different pitches. Listen how this will be a bit crazier than if I just choose right, or just choose left. Okay, let's bring that down. So we also have attack here for the oscillator, attack and release. Let's try changing the algorithm there. So here, short attack, short release. Right, now we've got a long attack, fairly long, and a short release. So we can play around with those until we get something we like. Now, then we have the self-oscillating option, in which case most of these controls no longer apply because these are controls for the oscillator inside Phase Mutant, and that's just not being used at the moment. Here we're just getting the incoming audio as the carrier and the modulator. So here all we have is smooth control, a stereo width control here, and the amount and the intensity. So that's the extreme there. So the self-oscillation, that works well on some things and not so much on others, I would say. I mean, let's see on vocals, for example. For my personal taste, I'm not really crazy about this sort of thing on vocals. It depends. A little bit subtle can be kind of nice. If you hear, you know, the pitch tracking is not very smooth, so it can get a bit sort of steppy and a bit noisy. Now then, I mean, of course you can try and play around with the smoothing and stuff. And if you have too much noise or whatever, then maybe you can bring the cutoff down a bit. But I don't know, you know. I wouldn't be all that crazy about this sort of use. I'm sure it can sound good on certain vocals. Hasn't really worked all that well for stuff I've tried, to my taste.
Don't forget to smell the flowers.
But let's, you know, flick through the presets and see. Just to give you an idea.
To smell the flowers. Don't forget.
That's pretty cool.
Smell the flowers.
If you want that sort of thing.
Don't forget to smell the flowers. Don't forget. Don't forget.
Certainly for some genres, this could be really useful. You know, you're into very hardcore industrial stuff or something, or...
Don't forget. Don't forget to smell the flowers.
So you see here, if I bring the wet all the way up, you know, now we're basically turning the voice into a synth, right? But again, the pitch tracking, you know, makes it pretty iffy. You would need more sophisticated controls here to do interesting stuff with vocals if you want something more, you know, usable. Okay, another example here. So here's a vocal, and it's just an example of, you know, transforming that quite a lot. This sounds pretty nice though, I think. And so then what I did was I recorded that, just recorded a little loop. And this is that loop pitched down. And then I put it through another phase mutant. And just put a bunch of other stuff on it. Mugger Fogger, Ring Mod, Ringatron, Revolve. And I recorded this into Salome, and then now I can play that if I want. That would sound better without the input. So let's look a little bit at the modulation stuff. So if we jump back here, as I mentioned earlier, here the sequencer is modulating that. So this will be familiar to you if you're familiar with Bleass apps. we just got a sequencer. We can dial in values here, and then we set targets for those. So here I've set that to ratio. There's another possible target here, and I've just left it empty. And then here we dial in the amount. So it can be negative or positive. Put it in 0 if you don't want it doing anything. This also has the smoothing control, and you can make it a bit random or a lot random. And here you set the length of the sequence and the resolution of the steps. I've got a few suggestions about the resolution of the steps and stuff. A few other suggestions actually related to this sequencer about how things could be improved. You've got a snap thing here that's important. So snap on, if I try and drag this, it will automatically snap to the lines, right? But with snap off, I can go for in-between values. So snap can be very useful for certain things. So let's put that snap on again. Okay. Now, back then to the LFO. So we've got two LFOs. It can be free or synced to the beat. Okay, here free time, here synced to the beat. Note though, this sequencer only has synced options, no free option, which I think is a pity. It could totally, from a technical point of view, as far as I'm concerned, have a free option. Just like Bleass's arpeggiator has a free option, there's no reason why this shouldn't have, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that it would be totally possible, and it would be useful. Be useful for experimental stuff. So the LFOs, that should be, I think obvious enough how all that works to people who are watching this. We look at the envelope for a minute. That can be pretty interesting. I think I have some example in here with the envelope. Yeah, envelope example. Let's see. This was for another patch though. This for this one here. Let me just open up another one. Actually, let's use this example that's being modulated. Okay, so here this envelope will be triggered when it notices a transient. If I bring the attack and release down, that'll be a bit more obvious. So here we control the attack and release. And here, this is targeting the ratio. Okay, so that's what's given the this sort of fluttery, arpy type notes. So I can play around with the gain and attack and release until I get exactly what I want. So let's jump through a few presets. Generally, this is the sort of plugin where it's really better to learn how to use it, because I find that it can really make such a huge difference what algorithm you're using, and even stuff like what channel you're tracking, and all these controls like smoothing, attack, release, and so on. It's really better generally to just dial stuff in yourself in this. I always enjoy the sequencer in these Bleass apps. So the sequencer, yeah, you know, you have various things you can set here that will determine how that step operates. For example, with these both set like that, they're going to link to each other. What's nice with the LFOs is that they can have other LFOs as their modulation target. So in terms of suggestions for improvement, everybody, what I would like to see is, okay, there's a randomizer in this, but it's a very unsophisticated randomizer. It's just randomize, that's all. If I compare to, for example, AudioThing apps, the randomizer is so much better there because you can lock certain things that you don't want to be randomized. So I would really like to see a way to lock things so that they will not be randomized. As I said earlier, I wish there were more ratios available, and I wish there was an option for a totally unquantized ratio. I wish the sequencer had a free mode, as I say. I also wish that it could, that it had more values in it. Like, it doesn't have any dotted options, which is very weird. And it's only got a couple of triplet options, like the slowest triplet option is an 8th triplet. And so even if there isn't like a lock function added for the randomizer, it would be really useful to just be able to randomize the sequencer, or just randomize, you know, LFO1 or LFO2 or the envelope, or just randomize this main window and so on. But definitely a cool app. I do enjoy playing around with this a lot. Hope the video was useful for you, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.